Donald Trump is at it again. The U.S. president posting an article on social media about Canada falling into a technical recession. But it's the two words Trump added that are gaining the most attention: 51st state.
A shocking message from Trump was meant to grab attention, but Canada refused to play along. Instead of getting pulled into the drama, Canada stayed calm and focused on protecting its future. While the U.S. pushed another loud message, Canada showed strength, control, and a plan that could leave Washington with fewer wins than expected. Donald Trump posted two words on his social media platform in response to a Bloomberg article reporting that Canada's economy had entered a technical recession. Those two words were 51st state. The post was then amplified by U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra, the same ambassador who told Canadian media in May 2025 that it was time to move on from the president's annexation comments and that the matter was done. On Tuesday morning, with Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc already on a plane to Washington for the most consequential week of CUSMA negotiations before the July 1st deadline, Carney walked to a cluster of microphones on Parliament Hill and delivered his response in approximately 30 seconds. "We're not going to respond or react to every one of the president's social media posts," Carney told reporters. "It's an administration that we have to work with." He described Trump as an exceptionally active user of social media. He declined to call for Hoekstra's expulsion when asked. He declined to escalate. Then he walked into a cabinet meeting and left the 51st state post to be processed by the news cycle without any further Canadian government commentary. The response was a deliberate non-response, and it arrived at a precise moment when every Canadian diplomatic resource is concentrated on the July 1st CUSMA review deadline, rather than on managing the president's social media output. The context surrounding Tuesday's events is what makes Carney's tone notable, rather than merely restrained. LeBlanc traveled to Washington on June 2nd, carrying an official letter formally requesting that the United States and Mexico agree to a 16-year renewal of CUSMA, the full extension period that the agreement allows, rather than a year-by-year continuation. Canada has now made its position on the review explicit and on the record. It wants the full renewal. It wants the Section 232 tariffs on automobiles, steel, aluminum, and forest products addressed as part of any comprehensive arrangement, and it does not want the review to produce a piecemeal bilateral arrangement that separates Canada from Mexico or allows the United States to negotiate different terms with each country individually. But for us, there's the more fundamental structural issues, as people know, which relate to the so-called strategic sectors. That's the American term. The 232 tariffs that are on automobiles, on steel, aluminum, forest products, particularly, Carney told reporters. We're looking to determine whether there's a possibility of a new partnership there. That framing the possibility of a new partnership represents a shift in the language Carney has been using about the bilateral relationship. For most of the past 18 months, the Canadian government has consistently used the language of CUSMA compliance. The tariffs are illegal, they violate the signed agreement, they should be removed as a condition of productive negotiations. The shift toward discussing whether a new partnership is possible reflects a recognition that the July 1st deadline is approaching without a comprehensive resolution, and that the Canadian side may need to offer a structural framework for deeper cooperation, what Ontario Premier Doug Ford has described as Fortress North America, and what Carney referenced Tuesday as cooperating in economic sectors threatened by global competition, rather than simply demanding tariff removal under existing agreement terms. The Mexico complication is the one that Carney addressed most carefully when asked why American and Mexican negotiators appeared further along in their bilateral discussions than the US-Canada track. Carney said there's a series of technical issues between the US and Mexico that explain the more extensive bilateral discussions, distinct from the more fundamental structural issues that define the Canada-US negotiation. That characterization is diplomatic but functionally accurate. The American CUSMA proposals that have been publicly revealed, including the demand that at least 50% of vehicle content be US manufactured, up from the current regional content framework, are being discussed bilaterally between Washington and Mexico City, in a process that Canada has not yet been formally included in at the same level of technical engagement. The July 1st deadline is not a hard stop that terminates the agreement if no deal is reached. CUSMA includes provisions for the agreement to continue operating under annual review if the parties do not reach a 16-year renewal. Operating in annual review mode sustains indefinite uncertainty for investment decisions across automotive, steel, aluminum, agriculture, and energy sectors, industries that require multi-year planning horizons. LeBlanc's formal renewal request, delivered in writing to American and Mexican counterparts on June 2nd, is Canada's documented statement of preferred outcome. A full 16-year extension that provides the certainty integrated North American supply chains require. The technical recession Bloomberg reported the data point that prompted Trump's 51st state post is the economic backdrop against which all of Tuesday's events unfolded. Canada's GDP contracted in consecutive quarters, meeting the technical definition of recession. The contraction is documented. Its causes are also documented. American tariffs on Canadian automotive, steel, aluminum, and forest product exports reduced production volumes and export revenues across the sectors most exposed to the bilateral trade disruption. Auto plants in Ontario are currently manufacturing approximately 30% fewer vehicles than the prior year. Algoma Steel reported a $159.4 million net loss in Q1 2026, with $27.4 million in direct tariff costs in a single quarter. The recession that generated Trump's social media post was in significant part a product of the tariff policy Trump's administration imposed. Carney's decision not to engage the 51st state comment substantively is consistent with the posture he has maintained since the trade conflict began. When Trump made the same comments during the May 2025 Oval Office meeting, Carney told him in French that the rhetoric was not useful. When Pete Hoekstra amplified the June 1st post, Carney declined to demand his removal. When asked directly about the annexation comments at the Parliament Hill press conference on June 2nd, Carney described the president as an exceptionally active social media user and moved to the substance of the trade negotiation. LeBlanc met with U.S. Trade Representative Janice Charette and held a news conference at the Canadian Embassy in Washington on June 2nd. The July 1st deadline is 29 days away. The formal CUSMA renewal request is now in writing and on the American desk. The 51st state post is already several news cycles old. The negotiation continues. The specific economic leverage Canada brings to the July 1st table is the dimension that the 51st state rhetoric consistently obscures. Canadian pension funds hold approximately $733 billion in American equities, bonds, and private equity, making Canada the third largest foreign investor in the United States, behind only Japan and the United Kingdom. Canada supplies approximately 60% of American crude oil imports. Canada provides 80% of the potash that fertilizes American crops. Canadian electricity flows into New York, Michigan, Minnesota, and the American Northeast at volumes that American grid operators have built their reliability planning around.